Welcome to the MeAndHer Travel podcast. This is episode number 38, and we are thrilled to welcome some of our favorite travel buddies to the podcast today as we share tales from Africa, including how incredible it is to see a giraffe across the road in front of you, what it's like getting close enough to touch a lion, how encountering a territorial elephant makes you realize that you are a visitor in their home, and how the words "first zebra" have become part of our regular vernacular. All of this and more from part one of the wild and exotic country of Tanzania. Wheels up.
We're gonna be two hearts running wild.
Thank you for joining us today. I'm Tony. As usual, I'm here with my wife, Julie. Hello. I'll do it for her. But we have a very special guest today that we just couldn't do this podcast without because they are intricately tied to this trip and with us. And we are longtime neighbors and friends, and we have been doing stuff with them together for over 20 years and been on many trips.
So we wanted to have them on this podcast, not only because we planned it together every step of the way, but also because you might find it interesting that Jennifer had not done much traveling outside of the Americas and some Caribbean islands. So this was her first trip abroad, and she was game enough to take on an 18-day trip to Africa. Most people would start with a week in Europe or something like that.
And we should mention that this was a two-country expedition. In those 18 days, we visited Tanzania, and also Uganda. But Uganda will be another podcast later on, so the backstory on that one is set with a group of friends that named Mark and Chris, and they invited us to join them on an organized tour of Uganda, including the opportunity to hike into the jungle and hang out amongst the mountain gorillas.
Yeah, that was an invite that we just could not pass up. But when I realized that the dates of the trip fell over Jennifer's 50th birthday...
Sorry to rat you out on the dates.
I just couldn't agree to go without talking to her first because that's an important thing for us to share those special birthdays. And that was something that I didn't want to miss. So our bright idea instead was to invite them along. And Mark and Chris said that there was room for 2 more people, so that was really our perfect scenario.
However, we were told by some other friends that the Uganda and the gorillas will be life-changing, right? So don't even think about doing that and going that far without adding Tanzania and doing a proper safari as well. See, if you're going to spend that much time in Africa and, to go that far, you got to spend the extra time, pay the little bit extra money. Okay, it's a lot of extra money. Go to Tanzania, do a safari, and do the gorillas and make it one big trip instead of trying to go back there twice. So we agreed with that assessment, but as the other group wasn't going to go to Tanzania, this portion was going to be planned on our own. So the goal of this podcast is to share how to plan for this kind of a trip, what the travel process entails, what we will see in some of those parks, and hopefully to inspire you to book your own Africa safari.
Okay, so let's get these two involved now. Jennifer and Brian, welcome to the MeAndHer Travel podcast.
Welcome.
Well, thank you. We're honored to be guests, and it's actually very fun to relive the trip with you guys.
That is amazing, and we are so happy to have you here. How do you feel about being on the #1 travel podcast in the county?
Oh, it says county? I thought it said country.
No, that would be really a big...
I was going to say it's the highlight of my afternoon.
Someday.
Oh, my gosh.
So, Tanzania, or as most people call it, Tanzania. What do you guys think that when we asked you completely out of the blue to join us on this expedition out into Tanzania?
Well, I remember when Julie first brought it up, she said they wanted to talk to us about a travel opportunity, but they wanted to do it in person. So I said, okay. And we were going to plan to get together. And I said, all right, well, how many drinks do I need to have before you tell me about the locale?
Because I mentioned it was kind of a big deal.
Yes,
I was like,
that's why it had to be
going to be a big ask.
Right. So I said, how many drinks do I have? Let's just say 1 drink if it's in the United States, 2 drinks if it's Europe, 3 drinks if it's a developing country, or 4 drinks if it's a crazy adventure. And you said I needed 4 drinks.
Maybe 5.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so we were like, yeah, this is going to be a big ask. And Brian, I think it's interesting because you were happy to go along on this trip. And actually, what you guys said to me, which was maybe one of the sweetest things anybody has ever said to us before, you said, Jennifer, you said, we're going to say yes no matter what you said. We were going to say yes to. And you thought it was actually going to be a different destination.
Right. We had talked on the way over there and we said, we're just going to say yes no matter what it is. You had talked about friends who had done an Antarctic trip recently, so we thought it was going to be Antarctica, which would not be as high on my list.
Wait a minute. Does that mean if we had said Antarctica, we were all going to go to Antarctica? Because I
No.
think that we should put that back in the books.
No.
I don't love being cold, but I do like penguins.
I didn't want to go to Antarctica either. But anyway, so Brian, you were happy to go along on this trip and particularly to participate in experiential travel. And that's something that we talk a lot about in this podcast. And I know that it's something that's really important for you guys to focus on as well. However, one thing that surprised me about you is you said that an African safari was not really on your personal bucket list, like it was for sure for the rest of us. So tell us a little bit about that. And also, now that you have done it, does it change your mind about whether or not it should have been on your bucket list?
Well, I think it's the term bucket list that probably I don't agree on. I've never really been a bucket list person, as I'm putting it in air quotes on a podcast, so that makes a lot of sense.
I saw it.
Instead, I'm more in terms of having a life resume instead of a work resume, and what are, collecting meaningful, unique experiences along the way for that. And obviously being able to experience things with family or with close friends, that just like Jennifer said, we're all game. We're game for different things, so this seemed like the perfect trip to do.
And Jennifer, because this you had not traveled very far out of the United States, just to the Caribbean a little bit. And this was a highly adventurous trip. What were some of your fears, if you had any?
Yes, I was very anxious about the trip. I would say I was anxious because we were leaving our kids behind for 18 days, which seemed like a long time. I was checking the government website for the threat level, like travel advisories for the different countries. I was probably more anxious about going to Uganda than Tanzania because I had family who'd done a safari in Tanzania before, so that felt more comfortable to me. But yes, I was concerned about all different ways things could go wrong.
I was particularly concerned about some of the small bush planes that we needed to take. Like, I don't love the idea of flying in those tiny little planes, and that was something that worried me a little bit.
I didn't have any fears like that. And by the way, just for the record, when it comes to traveling abroad and looking at these countries and you go to the U.S. Department, saying, hey, what's the threat level? I do that with a giggle now because it's all political, and they'll say, hey, like France was like a 2 or a 3 at one point. We're like, no, France is fine. Like, these are not problem places. The government doesn't want us to travel there. Maybe we're not trading well with them at that time or some other reason. And they say it's a high threat. A lot of times it means absolutely nothing. Very safe to go to most places that we would ever think to even possibly go. And these are all set for tourism. So you were good on that spot, but it does put a little fear in there when you see it's a 2 or a 3, not a 1.
Well, and a lot of the time it's because maybe there was a terrorist attack just recently or something happened in that country leading up to it. And speaking of which, right before we were to go on this trip, maybe just by a couple months, if you guys remember, there was a story that made the news, and it was a woman who was on safari just with her family, lovely time. They're in their safari vehicle, and a bull elephant got angry, and it charged the vehicle, and it actually ended up flipping the safari car, and because of that, she lost her life. And we were like, oh gosh, what are we doing? But those kinds of stories are all over the world for all different kinds of travel things. You can't let that stop you. It was kind of a freak accident that's highly, uncommon, but it is the kind of things that you think about. Brian's laughing. Do you have any things that you were like worried about or afraid of before we went?
No, I wasn't worried about going at all. It was mostly just being away from the kids, like Jennifer said, leaving them home for almost 3 weeks was, one of the things we were concerned about.
That was the longest you'd ever left your kids, right? Still to this date, probably, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And looking back on that fear, was it okay?
It was great. It was all fine.
Good for them, too, to have a little time and space away from their parents and see what it's like.
And I'll say right now, once in country, either Tanzania or Uganda, I was never actually worried for my own safety. And some of the things that they put on the government website are things like, crime or whatever. And that's part of just being an intelligent tourist. I mean, I don't go walking out alone at night in a strange city in the United States. I wouldn't do it there either, right? So.
And we weren't really going to places like that anyway. But how old were your kids? Why don't you guys comment on that? What ages were your children when you did this?
Yeah, you've already called her out for 50, so now tell us about how old your kids are, too.
Well, everybody knows that we are in our 50s, and these are our close
joking.
friends. So it's pretty, safe to say they're in our age bracket.
They were teens and 20, but still they were busy and at home.
Okay. All right. So, as our listeners know by now, we love the research process and planning of our own trips. But planning an African safari was definitely outside the scope of our knowledge and our experience. So we did have a travel agency here in Minnesota that specializes in Africa, in Tanzania and Uganda and Rwanda and all kinds of safaris. They helped us plan the Tanzania portion of this trip. And they were great because they even coordinated the connecting piece of getting us to Uganda for the start of the organized tour with the other group. So it was a seamless transition, and we really appreciate the help with that. But Jennifer, what are your thoughts on the planning process? Because you and I did a lot of that initial legwork, and we went back and forth regarding our timeline and our lodging options and even the safari park options. And our timeline got bigger and bigger and bigger as it went. And the guys were like, wait, how long are we going to be gone? How much is this going to cost? What do you think about that?
I wasn't worried about the time, it was more the cost.
I probably don't enjoy the planning as much as you do. When our travel agent would send over the itinerary with the lodging and stuff, I would look up the lodging. That I could relate to. When she was talking about the different national parks and seeing these different things, I really didn't have any context for it. So I don't know that I really had much to add there. I kind of was trusting her.
Well, that's fair. And then we should mention, too, that planning a trip like this, you basically have to start a year in advance. Because not only is some of it seasonal, the best time to go to an African safari is going to be between June and October. So you have a very small window, and everybody's trying to go at that same time. So when you're planning, you're probably going to have to plan a year out because things are going to get booked.
If not more than a year out, I remember one of the lodging options we looked at wasn't even available for our time frame.
That's true. Because I think we were less than a year maybe at the time we started. I can't remember exactly when, but it is important to, if you're thinking about doing this, get a head start, do your research, find a travel company. That will be much more helpful to you.
So, yes, it's hard to plan a trip like this, but because of that, first, you have to start looking at packing and how you pack everything into that and all of the things that you'd possibly want to do. And it's hard to know the things that are even possible. For example, Brian, you had something that you really wanted to experience that we ended up having to cut because we just didn't have the time. Why don't you explain what you wanted to do? Sorry.
Yeah, no,
because I wanted to do it too.
Well, we were flying in, and right where the city that we're flying into is where Kilimanjaro is. So I thought it'd be great. But actually, hiking Kilimanjaro can turn out to be a 7-day, 10-day experience on its own. But maybe, I thought, we could go for just a day. Just start going up, get the experience, see the mountainside, maybe not do the full thing, but at least experience it and see it and just get up close to it. But yeah, I mean, Kilimanjaro is, like a top 5 hiking experience for the world. You do pass through 5 climate zones, so it would have been a cool experience, but we have a finite number of days. There's a lot of things we want to do. We kind of had this, as Julie has said, we're backed up against the Uganda trip, so we knew we only had kind of a finite number of days. And I just look at it as, well, it gives us a reason to go back to Africa someday.
Totally, I was with you on that. And I didn't really know what it would entail to have that trip, to have the Kilimanjaro hiking part of it, until I started looking afterwards and was like, yeah, let's try and find a way to do this. And then I realized, yeah, Brian, we're not going to get to do this, because if you want to do it, you don't want to go up to just the first stage and just stop, because you're not even out of the trees. And to do that hike, you really do need probably a week to 10 days to take your time there.
I agree. So I didn't feel like it was much of a compromise at all. It was something I threw out there. But then, when you're going with 4 people, you got to be flexible. And like I said, another reason to go back to Africa.
That's true. And there are some short hikes that you can do that would have been really fun, but it would have taken us out of our way one direction and then to go back the same direction. And then, of course, the moms got involved and said, well, what if you twist your ankle? And now are you going to sacrifice the rest of your enjoyable trip because you hurt yourself? So you don't want to have to always be thinking about that. But it was a consideration like, I don't know, that's a little bit more strenuous. And what would that be like? So.
And the other thing is that when you fly into Kilimanjaro Airport, that's the name of the airport, the thing you have to realize is that if you're going to go on safari, you're going to go into the airport, go up onto the highway, and you're going to take a left. You're going west, and you're going to the other side of the country. If you're going to Kilimanjaro, the mountain, you turn right, and you go the opposite direction. So you're adding not only just distance and time, it's combination.
So my question is then, what do you guys think, or what are your thoughts or advice, or what do you think the value is of having a travel agent for a trip like this? What are your thoughts, having done it now?
I think it's super important. I mean, we didn't know anything about it. This travel agency that we use is like a boutique travel agent that focuses on Africa. I mean, they know exactly where to send us. They have the right contacts. I mean, we'll get into it later, but your travel guide is super important. And I think it was very valuable to us.
Another thing I thought about, we did kind of compare and contrast. We didn't go with this company right away. We did look at some other things, and we had some friends who had used another company. But when I started looking up stuff, I was worried because they say to go with a bigger outfitter, just because you might choose somebody, and then guess what? In a year's time, they may not be in business anymore. So it is advantageous to choose a travel company that has a base in the United States that is reputable and that you can rely on, but then they have very solid contacts in the countries that you want to go to. So maybe they have, like their secondary offices there. And so that there's some fluidity there and you feel a little bit more safe about that because you can definitely pay less, but who knows what kind of, fly-by-night outfit you might have just signed on with. That's my opinion.
So after our in-person meetings with our travel agent, who was a good friend, and discussing our vision and going over our wish lists, watching our costs and editing our multiple drafts of the trip. We had lots of multiple drafts. And we finally got our final itinerary. We flew from Minneapolis to Amsterdam, and for anybody, it could be anywhere, but we went to Amsterdam, and as there was no direct flights, I mean, you're not going to fly from Minneapolis into Tanzania. And we chose to do a one-night layover there so we could split up the 15 hours of travel, and before we moved on to Arusha in Tanzania the next day. But what did you guys think about the overnight layover? Was it good, an added benefit, or was it more of a hassle than it was worth? And would you have liked to kept on trucking right down to Tanzania?
I really enjoyed being there. We got to go down the canals. We got to take some great pictures. We got the great food. I think we met up with some friends of yours, even from our hometown, that were there that night. Wild. And we had some, late night drinks at a bar. It was a great time. And yeah, it split up the flying into kind of two different parts, but it didn't feel rushed. It didn't feel overly hassled by any means because we still got to have, one night in a hotel and get some sleep. And then we had, a big plane trip ahead of us the next day.
By being in a city that was so vibrant as Amsterdam, we stayed up till after 11 o'clock and really absorbed.
Crazy party animals.
No, which
11 o'clock. Woo!
We just did a 7-hour time change.
Yeah.
My point is, we absorbed the entire time change in Amsterdam, and then we were ready to hit the ground running, so to speak, when we got to Tanzania.
Absolutely. Okay, cool. So back to the safari discussion. So once we were in the country, we toured 4 parks: Tarangire National Park, Lake Manyara National Park, the Ngorongoro Crater, and Serengeti National Park. So we're going to discuss the first 2 parks in this episode, and in part 2 of Tanzania, we will cover the other 2. So we'll get to a description of these parks in a minute, but first, I want to know, so going into this trip, what were you the most excited about, and did you have an expectation or a wish list or something that you really wanted to experience? Jennifer?
Well, I feel like if you go on a safari, people say, did you see the big 5? So I kind of had this little 5-point checklist. And the big 5 in Africa are the African elephant, the leopard, the lion, the buffalo, and the black rhino. So in my mind, I thought that was kind of my checklist. But other than that, I had no expectations.
How about you, Brian? Did you have expectations? Did you want to see anything special?
Obviously, for me, when you think about planning the trip, as Jennifer said, you think about the animals. But when I reflect on the trip, I think of it not just as the animals. I think of it as the scenery, the landscapes, the people that we met along the way. Those are some of my strongest memories. Obviously, you have memories and you've got pictures of animals, but I think it was the whole experience of the culture, the people, and kind of the landscapes that I have as well in my mind now.
Did you want that as your expectation going into it, or just is that a retro? Because we're going to ask maybe later as to what your retro thoughts are, but what about going into it?
I think it's very retro, right? So at the beginning, when you're planning a photo safari, I'm just thinking about the animals. I'm thinking about we're going to go to different national parks. We're going to see different types of animals. And you have animals on your mind a lot because that's the part that you feel like you're planning for. And then everything else just kind of happens along the way, I feel like.
Okay. So Julie and I have been to Africa multiple times. We adopted a little girl from Ethiopia. And recently we were in Egypt. And we've been back to Ethiopia as well. But I'm curious, what were your first impressions of Tanzania, or Africa for that matter? And was it what you expected, or did it really surprise you, just hitting the ground there and seeing Africa for the first time?
I mean, our first experience when we landed, if I remember right, it was late at night, and we had to do a drive, and we were kind of on this 2-lane road. And it was just a little bit of craziness, right? Because I remember driving down this road and, people didn't necessarily obey the lanes, and it was just all. And then as we'd go through little cities and stuff, and this was, I think it felt like it was 10 o'clock at night, which again isn't late, but just everybody was outside, and there were people all over. There were motorbikes passing us, and everybody's on, passing, and so it was just a little bit of, chaos. You could start to see the poverty. It was nighttime, so you couldn't really get full grasp of it all. So it was very different than if we were leaving one of the airports, in the U.S. and you were driving somewhere you wouldn't see anybody. You'd be on a road, and it would just be a very quiet, uneventful ride. Where this seemed like a very eventful ride, and there was a lot going on
In the dark.
Yeah, kind of late at night on this road.
Absolutely. What about you?
I agree. I was surprised that we'd be out where it seemed like we weren't close to anything, and then someone would be randomly walking on the road, and we're like, what are you doing this time of night out randomly walking?
Yeah, welcome to Africa. Like anywhere you go, there's just people walking, and they're walking on the side of the road, across a field, up a mountain. You see them everywhere. And you have to we're going to hit that person. We're going to hit them, and somehow they don't, but you think that they're always going to hit animals and people. So, Julie.
Are you asking if I had any expectations?
Yeah. This was different than our Ethiopia trips. So
It was. It's very different. In Ethiopia, there are not nearly as many exotic animals because of the deforestation of the country. Most of them have gone off to greener pastures, so to speak. So I was very excited to see some of the big animals. I think I really wanted to see a giraffe. I really wanted to see an elephant. The lions, I was like, yeah, that'd be cool. But I think the really big animals are the ones I wanted to see in the wild roaming. I just think that has such big impact to see their big bodies roaming around. So that's what I was looking forward to.
Okay, so let's go on to the parks. As all my friends and listeners know, I'm a maps guy, so let me explain where Tanzania is just in case you didn't know so you can visualize this itinerary. Tanzania, by the way, I'm going to struggle doing this because I want to say Tanzania or Tanzania, and I'm back and forth and I can't get it in my head which one I want to do. So it's located in East Africa, just south of the equator, and it's on the eastern. It's near the eastern coast, with an island off in the Indian Ocean. Uganda and Kenya are its closest neighbors to the north. Mozambique and Zambia to the south, and Mount Kilimanjaro is the highest peak, and it's right on the border, so partially in another country. So it's the highest in Africa, actually.
Yeah, so the parks we visited are all in the northern part of Tanzania, and they're not really that far apart from each other. But keep in mind that many of the roads are not paved. And like Brian said, there is a lot of human and animal and vehicle traffic sharing these roads. So getting around is generally not a quick thing at all. And really, you don't even want to drive at night because a lot of those roads are completely unsafe. They're not lit. They're dangerous. And there's just too many animals and stuff that you could hit. So you got to do it during the day. So it's hard to get around. It's not a quick thing. And that's why another reason a travel company is very helpful, because they actually know how many parks are possible in the amount of time that you have, and then which ones will suit your needs too. They'll help you kind of decide which ones are going to be best.
And in those parks, there are all kinds of lodging options and different price points. So it really does depend on what kind of experience you are looking for and what your budget is. Our timeline was probably our most important factor because we had to be in Uganda on a certain day. So some places in Tanzania we just couldn't get to, like Kilimanjaro, because of the distance and the travel time.
So one of the things that ended up getting cut was the Great Migration, where millions of animals are crossing the Serengeti and almost 2 million wildebeest alone cross the Mara River. That takes place a little bit further north than we were going to be, so we just couldn't make it happen. And let's talk about this. I don't even know if all of us even wanted to see that river crossing anyway.
I did.
I'm curious, Brian, is that something that interested you?
I think it would, because it's something that only happens, a certain time of year. It's a unique experience. It's obviously, even if you plan on it, I've heard many stories where it might or might not happen. It could vary by a few weeks. So I think it's something that's hard to plan for, but obviously if you could experience it, it would be a great thing to experience.
Yeah, you're planning it out a year in advance, and if they're off by 2 weeks because of dry,
you're gonna miss it.
you're going to miss it, and you just paid all this money to be in the middle of the migration, and you're at a camp. Where's the wildebeests?
But you know what happens on this migration, right?
Ooh.
Like you guys have probably seen this on National Geographic. These wildebeest cross this river and 250,000 of them will get consumed by crocodiles and other, no, seriously, I looked up the numbers. It's a lot. It's insanity. Not just by crocodiles, but by other predators as well. So the lions know that they're crossing, there's a lot going on there. I just didn't know if that was something that I could personally handle. Jennifer, what do you think about that?
Yeah, my parents saw it and said it was awesome, right? It was pretty amazing. But we only had so much time and we had to make choices. So
Yeah.
our trip was amazing.
Yeah. And like Brian said, you just don't know when they're going to be there. So the logistics of trying to make that happen were tricky.
And speaking of logistics, how did you like the 33 pounds per person weight limit for luggage? I mean, to travel just anywhere, 33 pounds can be light, but that includes carry-ons and everything that you have. So because we were on small bush planes going out of the Serengeti later on to go up to Uganda, we could only have small amounts. So between the sites. So with a minimal amount of weight allowance that each person could carry, how did you manage packing for 18 days, Jennifer, with only 33 pounds on you?
Okay. At first, I was very worried about this part.
And angry a little, maybe.
Yeah, probably. Right?
If you knew Jennifer, you'd
I'm usually a
understand
5 pairs
why.
of shoes kind of gal. But it did mean that we had to wear our hiking boots because we needed those for Uganda. You wouldn't have needed them for Tanzania, but we needed them for Uganda. So we had to wear them on the plane, which wasn't ideal, right? All of the clothes I brought were kind of mix and match. I had the same kind of uniform every day. It was a pair of hiking pants, a tank top, and then a long sleeve shirt over it. And I just kind of mixed it up. All of the lodging options that we selected had laundry services. So we took advantage of that as well to help us kind of make things go further. But
As long as you had a couple days there, because sometimes the turnaround took a little bit. So you have to
Yep.
make sure that it's not just one overnight. But they would wash it and they would bring it back folded. It was really
Pile
lovely.
it up with rose petals nearby, and it was very nice.
except in the Serengeti when they hung it out to dry and they brought it back to me dustier than I got it.
Well, and did you have like a clothesline line across all your shirts?
Yes.
We didn't wash clothes there. We were like, oh, good thing. What about you, Brian? What did you think about having to pack that way? Did it change how you traveled moving forward?
I like the idea of being a minimalist and not having a lot to bring. The most exciting part was buying a new bag. We bought these Cotopaxi colorful bags, which is still one of my favorite bags. It's got all these separate compartments and places to put things. But, packing for safari, it's all pretty lightweight, easy clothes, everything kind of mix and matches. It doesn't really matter much once you get out there. But like Jennifer said, it was probably, I had a safari hat. So it's like, what do you do with that? And it was these boots. If we put the boots in our bag, it probably took up 30% of our suitcase. So we found ourselves wearing the boots probably more than we would have thought, even on the airplane and in Amsterdam.
And I do think the boots are important even in Tanzania, just because it's so dusty. There could be creatures. It's a lot of, rocky roads. And you could have done with a lighter weight tennis shoe boot, hiking boot, like a hiking tennis shoe probably would have been fine. But since we were going to the jungle in Uganda, we did need the bigger boot. But
And unless you're doing a bush pilot situation, if you're just coming into Kilimanjaro Airport and going out on the safari in Tanzania and then going back to the airport, we're talking major jets, you don't have that restriction. Mm-hmm. You can do a full-size bag and luggage, the wheeled luggage, and your porters and whatnot are going to help you. But doing what we did by going up to Uganda on a bush plane, we were limited to 33 pounds. So that's not going to be the same for everybody. So don't freak out if you're doing this and you want to go on a safari and go, I can't do that. You can if you just keep it to the safari. So, and if you remember, I broke every rule there was by having my carry-on backpack, my smaller backpack for my camera and like iPad. That was like 40 pounds. So that was more than my luggage bag was allowed in and of itself. And we had to hide it when we went to the counter. And I held it behind me so they couldn't see it. Because if they saw it, they were going to say, nope, you can't take this because it was just way too heavy.
Yeah, I think actually our tour company said that there was a special allowance for cameras. So you could actually have a little bit more.
Yeah, it was way over that.
But at that one airport, you weren't supposed to. So then you could have gotten in trouble there. And that's actually where you dropped your lens, remember? That was great. Yeah. So anyway, before we even officially entered the parks, when you're just on your drive in, I mean, there's no fences, right? This isn't a zoo. So these animals can go wherever they want to, whenever they want to. So we were already seeing wild animals on the drive into some of these parks. So tell us what it was like seeing your first wild animal, and if you can remember what it was, and what were your thoughts about that? Either one of you.
I don't remember exactly what it was.
Oh, I do. You don't remember what our first animal was? We were driving down the highway towards Tarangire Park, and somebody in the group said, there's a zebra. And it was way off to the side, like let's say a half a mile out in the field. And our driver, being so polite, pulled over. Do you remember what he said to us? And after we sat there and took pictures of it from a half a mile away?
I don't remember.
Okay, so he was giggling to himself, and as we took all the pictures. He let us be there for like 5-10 minutes, and then we're driving away, and he's giggling. I go, "What's up?" And he goes, "Yeah, you're gonna see these better." And we're like, "What?" And he goes, "You're gonna have them around you, like no big deal." But when anybody comes here and they see an animal, they want to stop because it's important to them to see their first animal, big animal, and that was big to us, the zebra. So from that point forward, that was hilarious because we just were like, "Oh, look at that! It's way off in the distance, like first zebra."
Yeah, so we actually say that now when we're on a trip. We just said this on our last trip. When you get really excited about going somewhere and you start taking a million pictures. It could be in France of the Eiffel Tower, maybe when you're at a distance. It could be anything. And you start taking pictures like a crazy person. And then you realize, okay, dial it back because I'm going to have a better view later. I don't need to take 1,000 right now. And so we call that like the first zebra syndrome, where you just get so excited you can't even help yourself. But that was kind of funny. But I don't know if that was our first animal. I remember, for me, the biggest impact was when we were driving on the road to the park and a giant, a huge giraffe walked right in front of our car. We had to stop for it. And I remember distinctly because it had such unusual coloring from what I expected it to look like. It was almost black. It was like a really dark colored giraffe and huge, and he just ambled slowly across the road like he had all the time in the world, which he did because we learned that if you hit a giraffe or a wild animal with your vehicle in Tanzania, you have to pay a fine, and it's a very large fine. Obviously their income is based on tourism, and so they value their wild animals as they should, and there's a big fine if you hit one. So our driver stopped, and we just relaxed and watched across the road. I remember that clearly. I don't remember the order, whether it was zebra or giraffe, but what about you guys? Any animals that you were like, oh my gosh?
I don't remember the first animal, but I do remember my first pictures. The animals were so far away.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really...
And a lot of them.
Yes. I took so many pictures of really nothing.
Okay, me. So Tarangire. Our first major park that we went into was called Tarangire. And this park is famous for its giant baobab trees, which are really cool. Look it up if you haven't seen what that looks like or you're not sure. And for having massive elephant herds in this park in particular. A lot of the parks have elephants, but this one has really large herds. And it's kind of nice because it is a smaller park, so it's far less busy than the Serengeti Plains. And the terrain here is actually kind of hilly and then dotted with some woodlands and seasonal swamps, so you have a little bit more interest in your topography. Also in this park, you may be able to watch wildlife for extended periods of time, quietly just parked on the side of the road watching them without being interrupted by hordes of safari vehicles. So speaking of which, Jennifer, why don't you explain what our safari vehicle looked like and why we chose what we did? Because you have a relevant story to that.
Our safari vehicle was kind of a tan colored van, let's say, that would probably hold 6 to 8 people. We just had it for the 4 of us. The cool part about it is that you could lift up the top so that you could stand and have a clear view for your camera while you're observing the wildlife. And then if you're just driving, you can put it back down. And especially on like the cold mornings or when we would leave in the morning, we could leave it down before we got to where we were going. Anything else about that?
Yeah, you wanted to say why we wanted a private driver because your sister had been on a safari where they didn't have the same experience. And it actually really talks to the quality of your time there.
Well, they were actually on a private thing, but she recommended we do a private as well because while they were sitting watching I think it was a cheetah maybe, they were watching a cheetah and this other safari vehicle right next to theirs was full of people. And this one woman kept wanting to leave to go find the lions. And so finally the driver took her to go see the lions. And my sister's driver said, they're not going to actually be able to find the lions this time of night. She's wasting her time. And my sister's point was that if you are in a group of 8 other people, you're kind of beholden to the squeakiest wheel, right? As far as what you do and where you go. We had the privilege, if we wanted to sit and watch that leopard in that tree for 45 minutes, we could do that, right? Or if we wanted to go chase after some birds, we could do that. So
who would want to do that?
We didn't do any chasing of birds. Come on. And Brian, we each had our own role in the safari vehicle, and those were what you and I like or not like about those vehicles. What was the roles that you had and I had in the vehicles?
Well, I'm not sure I'm exactly know what you're referring to, but what I'd say is, we're on a photo safari. Yet I already have 130,000 pictures, so I wasn't going to be the picture taker in the group. I know Tony's, brought his DSLR camera, and Jennifer's got hers. So, I was more in the I'm going to help spot the animals. I'm going to enjoy the experience. And then my thing was I was going to take video. Mm-hmm. So I used my iPhone and I mostly just took video in different scenarios because I knew we were going to have a lot of pictures already being taken.
Exactly, because I was taking just photos and we needed videos because we paired them up later on. It was great to have both the video and the photos of the group.
Yeah. And just one other thing on that is, why I really like the videos when you go back and look on it. I mean, you can have great pictures, and the pictures are great. I'm glad we have them, and we had 2 people taking great pictures. But when you go back and watch these videos, it really puts you in the scene. You really get the feel of what it was like to be there, especially, a lot of times I just kept spanning around. Because we had, like Jennifer said, you got this pop-up safari vehicle that's got kind of, when you stand up, you can literally go 360 with it. And I took a lot of videos just kind of going 360, and it really is a different view and a different way to go back and view it versus just having pictures. So I enjoy having both.
Yeah, and so just to clarify too, like Tony had the long range lens, Jennifer had a mid range lens, Brian and I would take pictures and take video. And so we kind of had like the whole gamut covered depending on what animal we were seeing at any given time. And then maybe like 1 or 2 of us were up in the front helping our driver spot things. But it was fun because we could just kind of move around, switch seats because we had that vehicle all to ourselves. We had plenty of room for our bags. We had plenty of room to just hop to different spots. Like it was really nice to have that flexibility, and like Jennifer said, we could come and go as we pleased, and that was just so nice to have that variety of stuff.
Yeah, and I think after we got home, I think we helped support build at least 1 new data center from all of our downloads and videos. Yep. But all right, let's talk about Tarangire. What were your thoughts and impressions about this park in particular, and what you liked about it? Maybe what sticks in your head, what you think about it, and what is a must-do within the park?
Well, maybe I'll go first. 'Cause I'm sure we all have views on this, but this park was honestly like one of my favorite, and I think because there were just so many animals and the vastness of the landscape, and we got really close to a lot of animals. I remember we can go through some specific things, but we had a, specific situation where we were by like 13 elephants and they were on, both sides of the vehicle. Julie mentioned, the giraffe crossing right in front of us. It was just the closeness to the animals, the volume of animals. It was just, I think it was really exciting. I mean, each park kind of has its own thing, but I really enjoyed this park. Jennifer?
Yeah, I agree. We saw so many great animals, and there was rivers and trees, and yeah, it was awesome. I was surprised that I enjoyed looking at the trees as much as I did. Those acacia trees are so pretty.
Yeah, they have a lot of different trees that we
Yeah.
just don't have here. So that's really unique. And I really did enjoy, like you did, Brian, the topography, because you felt like you weren't just on a flat surface, like on a plane, just kind of doing the same road all day long, beating down in the heat. You actually had some shade, and you had some hills, and you had trees and water and green foliage. Like there was more color. It felt more colorful to me. And I just remember like the sunset there was so pretty. Like just seeing that on the landscape was gorgeous.
For me, coming back after the trip, when you go do this and then you do the Serengeti, which we'll talk about in the next podcast, the topography is so different that it was like around every corner there was something new, and it was a lot of windy and turny. Whereas when you're in Serengeti, you can see for miles, so you know what's coming way off in the distance. Where this one, you turn a corner and oh my gosh, there's 27 zebras standing in the middle of the road, and you didn't see it 10 seconds before that. So that was kind of everything just popped up on you quickly when you're in Tarangire.
So the first place that we stayed at was called the Sopa Lodge. So our first kind of like bush or in park lodging. So this was a pretty large property, and it had a really traditional vibe. It had conical shaped buildings. There was elephants roaming nearby, and there was small rodents, or I don't know, like rabbit-like creatures called hyraxes that were running around everywhere. That was really unique and different. When you first walk up, you're like, what the heck are those things? But they had a nice big pool and a large dining room for huge buffet dinners. And they also did some traditional local singing and dancing for entertainment, which was really nice. And then they had a gorgeous veranda. So you could sit out there and enjoy the sunset and a glass of wine, and you could hear the elephants like crunching around and even see them too. So what are your thoughts, because this was your first stay out in the bush, what are your thoughts on your room or this lodge in particular? And did your first bush accommodations in Africa exceed your expectations, or were you disappointed? What did you think about them?
I thought everywhere we stayed was really nice. I mean, I didn't feel like anything lacked at any of the places. They all had, we picked places that all were really unique, so they had a different feel to it. Like you said, this one had a very traditional feel and was kind of a cool first spot to stay. But yeah, sitting out on that veranda at sunset with a glass of wine was fantastic.
What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, the cool part was, like Jennifer said, we're sitting out there and you have, a beer or a glass of wine, and you can still see animals, off in the distance, and even pulling out cameras and taking a few pictures from the balcony of the resort, I remember. But yeah, no, it was very comfortable. It definitely exceeded my expectations because, like you said, you keep saying, oh, we're going in the bush. But no, this was, somewhat luxurious and very comfortable, I would say. So I did not feel like we were roughing it at all, even though we were in Africa.
Mm-hmm. We were not roughing it. I mean, we did pick places that were going to feel very nice and comfortable when we got back at the end of long days about being out in the vehicles. So,
and let's talk about safety too, because there are wild animals roaming around at any given time, and they have people watching out for that. But they did say at night, like, they sometimes wanted to walk you back to your room if you were going back late, because there could be lions, there could be whatever. So that's an interesting element to be like, okay, yeah, we got to keep an eye out, or a thought that there's other things out here with us. So you have a little bit of security that way, but that's kind of fun and exciting. And then we would throw open our shades in the morning and we would look out, and there was inevitably animals out there right in front of our room of different types. And it was so fun to be like, what's out here right now?
So that was Tarangire, and then when we left there, we toured over to Manyara National Park, and as we did that, we actually got to see some really cool things on the way. It wasn't just like, hey, just get in the car and just drive over there. We basically safaried our way over to that other park, and we saw a mini wild beast stampede, like coming across a river, and wildebeest. Yeah, sorry, what did I say?
I don't know.
Oh, wildebeest. Yeah, wildebeest, and which was our mini migration. So we didn't get to see a lot, but we got to see, there's probably a couple hundred there. Oh, all of that. And then
And
we
none
got
of
to
them
see,
got eaten.
yeah, none of them got eaten at that point. We did see some stuff being eaten, but not there. So it was like our migration as we were driving out of there. And then we came upon Manyara National Park. So this is the one park that we did not do an overnight at. It was on our way to farther north, but we just drove through this one as we were going. This park feels more lush. It's like very, very tropical trees. It's up against a lake. It has a soda lake, which is a style of lake, so a soda lake, which has an extremely high alkaline aquatic environment. So it's different kind of birds that like it, and fish and animals, and the groundwater forests. These are right up against the lake. They say that this park is home to the climbing lion, and also a lot of birds, baboons, buffalo, elephants, and a hippo pool.
So the lion thing, they aren't really known for climbing trees because they don't have as agile or flexible of a spine as, like, say, the leopard. But in some regions, they have taught themselves to climb trees. So they do this to get out of the heat. They do it to avoid the aggressive, like, tsetse flies, and then just, of course, for an elevated viewpoint for hunting. So this particular park and Queen Elizabeth Park in Uganda are the two main places that you can see these special climbing lions. I can't recall if we managed
We
to
saw
see
zero.
one. Yeah,
We didn't see one.
I think that
Very
was a bummer.
elusive.
So what are our thoughts on this park? Because it was a kind of on the way place, but what do you guys think about it in general? Share your thoughts.
Yeah, I'm looking at these two over there going,
It was fine. I wouldn't go out of my way to go there. We did get to see baboons and other primates, and
That we
even
didn't see else.
No, we didn't see them other places, and it was like we saw like little moms and little babies like nursing their babies and stuff. It was really cute, and we saw a bunch of flamingos and.
Yeah, I'd say, of the 4 parks that we visited in Tanzania, I would rank this one as the lowest. I mean, obviously, you still get some experience. It had different landscape. We did see some birds. The baboons were pretty cool. There was lots of them. So like everything else, it was kind of the one spot that we saw the most of them. But when you think about safari and the larger animals and kind of the uniqueness of those, I'd say this wasn't the park for that. But there definitely was some different, landscape and, like you said, the lake and some different views that we had that you didn't see at the other parks.
Well, part of it was on our way, right? So it wasn't like we went really far out of our way to do this. So it was fine. It did kind of feel a little bit like Jurassic Park. So that kind of had a fun and unique vibe. Could you skip it? Yes, you probably could. If you had a time pressing engagement and you really wanted to maximize your time in some other parks, you easily could miss this one. But it visually did have a very different look. So it was kind of special for that part.
all right, let me come to the defense of Lake Manyara National Park, because I think that, yes, I think we were all a little bit disappointed with this park compared to the other 3 parks that we went to. But if you catch this park, which we didn't, at the right time of the year, it is loaded with animals, loaded with birds on the shoreline, loaded with things out in the water, and we did not see that. We didn't see the climbing lions. We saw a lot of baboons, which was really cool and was probably the highlight of this, but there were a lot of birds there, I especially liked. But when we went down to the water, that could have been totally different. And from seeing pictures and videos of that park in the right time, it would have been really awesome. So I think we just caught it at the bad time for that. And then we also went up afterwards. We went to a really cool place up on the hill above the park where we got to have a great lunch, and it was the most amazing view overlooking the lake. So there are some really good things about that park in that area. But compared to the other 3, I think it was a little bit of a letdown at this time. Now, we're going to wrap up here, and we're going to end this episode with a little, all right, what did we all take from these first 2 parks and traveling to Africa? And kind of like maybe what's your impressions most that you remember from Tarangire or Manyara or Arusha or Amsterdam or anything you want to talk about. And then in the next episode, we're going to get into the Ngorongoro crater and to the Serengeti. So Jennifer, anything that you want to impart with us on the last part of this?
Well, we haven't spoken directly about our guide, Tom. So he picked us up on that first day and at our hotel in Arusha, and we spent the entire 6 or 7 days with him. And he had to go through a lot of training to be able to even be a guide. And his knowledge of the animals and the birds, where to find them, about them, his driving skills. We talked about the roads and how crazy they were and how nerve-wracking, especially when you drive up to that volcano, like coming on oncoming traffic with those big trucks. You need to have an incredibly skilled driver. So I think that's my plug for using a super reputable tour company and getting a great tour guide. And then the other thing I was going to say about our trip in general is that when I went into it, I thought it would be seeing some animals, and at some point you would kind of be like, oh, there's another lion. And I absolutely never felt like that. Every day I woke up with awe and wonder and excitement because every day was different. Every day had its own unique experiences, and we were moving from place to place. And it was, I mean, we the alarm went off at 5:15. We popped out of bed every day. Excited, thrilled.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah, I think along those same lines, if you're kind of on the fence as to whether you want to, go to Tanzania or do a photo safari, my pitch for it is you've watched documentaries maybe about the area, you've been to the zoo, you've seen animals. This is a totally different experience. The scale of everything, the vastness of the landscapes, the volume of animals that you see, the closeness that you can get to the animals. Like it's a number one experience. It's awesome. So highly recommend it.
Yeah, and I want to also talk about Tom for a minute because you really get to know these people. So it's not just your, tour guide for the week. And he was with us the whole time that we were in Tanzania from the very moment we started to when we left. And when we left, he sat at the airport in his vehicle until our flight took off and he knew we were safely in the air and on to our next destination. He was so conscientious, so kind. He was up far earlier than we were every day and stayed out far later every day, cleaning the vehicle every single night. So we walked into a brand new, fresh, clean vehicle, which, we weren't getting it dirty, but he also just wanted to make sure that it was dust-free and as nice as possible and refilled our waters. And it was just so nice that he took care of us. And then he also left a newborn baby at home. And Jennifer and I, as mothers, we were like, what? How is it possible that you left a baby? And he's like, this is my livelihood. This is our busy season. My wife understands. She has the support of her mom and the entire family because they have very large families that live together and help each other. It really takes a village there. That's a true thing. And so he left his newborn baby to come spend the week with us. And we felt very cherished and special. And I maybe shed a few tears when we said goodbye to him because it was that wonderful to get to know him and what his life is like.
All right, I'm going to go a different route. So we first started this journey, as we talked about, in Amsterdam. And Julie and I, thinking that we're like these expertise world travelers, we still have problems just like everybody else. And the four of us traveled to Amsterdam, and we know Amsterdam very well. Schiphol Airport, and then you take the train in. Well, when we all booked our places, we booked them at the same time, but the same day basically. But our hotels that we booked, when I say hotels, plural, because both couples booked separate hotels because they were off by just a hair on the name. They had the same name, but just a little off. So we were in different hotels. Julie and I also, because we were going to be out in the safari, didn't get a cellular data plan because we didn't think we needed it.
Because we're cheap.
Well, that too. But we also thought we were not going to be able to use the phone out there anyway, so what's the point of getting it for the whole trip? So when we had little issues like, hey, we'll meet you at the Starbucks, guess what? There's 2 Starbucks at the place we were looking for. They went to one, we went to another. They couldn't call us. Run back to our hotel because we had to find if we could get on their Wi-Fi to be able to communicate with them, all while we're trying to get to the airport in a rush because our plane took off in like 2 hours. So we had to basically separate and just meet at the airport. So we thought we were going to have to meet at the airport. It was kind of crazy, and it was a very stressful moment going into a very long trip.
Oh, and let's not forget, you gave us our passes to get back to the airport on the train, and they didn't work.
Yeah, I don't know about that one. I'm gonna forget about that one a little bit. So
I will say, traveling with you two who are seasoned travelers, I take that for granted a little bit. But that morning, standing in that train station, not even knowing the name of the airport I was trying to get to and not being able to read any of the language, I had a bit of a panic attack.
Yeah, well, we were panicking too because I had to run. I had to sprint back to the hotel to try and get Wi-Fi because we had no connection. We had no way of communicating with you. So we learned a lot of lessons there, and that was good. That was good to learn.
I will say I was panicking more because I knew she would be panicking. I'm like, I know Jennifer's super upset right now, and we're going to have to figure this out. Like, we can get ourselves to the airport, but she doesn't know where we are. But I will say, so you live and you learn, and you're with 4 people. So communication's really important. Meeting places are really important. And by the way, we just get the international cell phone plan now. We have it permanently for us and our daughters because we all travel a lot, and we just don't even worry about that anymore. It's worth it.
So when you have troubles at the very onset of a trip like this, it's a little ominous, and you think, oh, wow, what are we in trouble for? It turned out perfectly pretty much after that. A couple things, but it didn't wreck our trip at all. We didn't even think of it past once we got to Africa. We didn't think about it too much. We'll get to some other things that may have happened later on. But for Tanzania first part, where we talk about Lake Manyara and Tarangire and Arusha and Amsterdam on the first part, that is it for this episode. We thank you all for listening, and we look forward to telling you more in the next episode, episode 39, about Tanzania, where we cover Ngorongoro Crater and Serengeti, and a lot of stuff to talk about there. So until then,
Wheels up.